Okay, hi, I'm Mel. I'm just sort of addressing. There's this video that a theist has made against a YouTuber, Creaky Blinder, and Creaky, I quite like his work. He's an atheist. He debunks a lot of conspiracy theories and flat earthism. He talks sometimes about atheism and religion. He sometimes debunks creationism, and like, I really appreciate a lot of what he does and says. And look, Cricky's more than capable of defending himself. So this is, I just want to sort of like talk in general to this theist and other theists out there, because he's saying, like the definition of atheism is they definitely, absolutely say that 100% certain that no gods exist, and that's not exactly correct. Okay, so here's the thing. Atheists are individuals, and individuals have different ranges of beliefs and certainties about different claims, right? Now, a lot of atheists just don't accept the claim they're gods because it doesn't meet burden of proof. So, not saying there are no gods, they're just saying, I don't believe in any gods because they have not met any, like, the burden of proof. Some will say there aren't any gods, but like how confident they are might depend on the arguments that have been given, might depend on the evidence being presented, the person presenting the evidence, and whatever else being said. It might also, like, it will depend on our understanding of events. So can we say anything with 100% certainty or confidence? I don't think we can. And I mean, like, I'm probably a lot more, well, hard line, I guess, atheist than Creaky seems to present himself. And that doesn't mean he's wrong and I'm right, or I'm wrong and he's right, or theists are right, we're both wrong, or any combination of any of that. I'm just saying it's different people have different perspectives. Now, I will say I don't think there are any gods, and like I will say, like the Christian God, no, it doesn't exist. No. How certain of that? I'm not altogether sure how certain. I'm over, like, probably at least 70-80% certain, but I can't put an exact number on it because I do read a lot of the scriptures to do with religions. I do listen to a lot of apologists. I listen to counter apologists. I listen to atheists. So it's going to change depending on the evidence of being presented and the claim that's being made. And so then I'm also going to go, what can we know is also going to come into that consideration. So it's not me being a coward. It's not Creaky being a coward by not being able to apportion 100% or even a certain percent certainty, or even not being able to be certain at all, because we are trying to be intellectually honest and just say we don't believe, and in some case, and most cases, we don't know. Because thing is, when people talk about a god or gods, a lot of the, pretty much most of it, is fundamentally unfalsifiable. It's not testable. They're talking about stuff that there's no way of showing what that anything at all has occurred, like, and it's like very difficult. So where certain claims have been made that have been tested, they've universally failed. I mean, and for sure, I can tell you, because I've read every single scripture or so-called holy books more than once, quite a few times, and I've listened to what, apologists have said, but they are all scientifically inaccurate, historically inaccurate. They're all fundamentally immoral and anti-human, in my opinion. Now, I understand that some people view these with a great, they have a lot of, they view these very highly, and I understand that. It's not meant to offend people. This is just my opinion, and you're allowed to have your opinion. And I mean, like, I think, but treating these as God breathed, inerrant, blah, blah, blah books, that, I mean, I think it's very problematic and leads to a lot of, quite honestly, discrimination, hate, and bigotry. And I think it does not do believers any good. Now, that doesn't mean to say there is not good stuff in these books. There is. But there's also a lot of bad stuff, and just acknowledge it. I mean, I think we need to say, no, it's not God breathed. Humans did this. You can believe they did this with the influence of God, but God did not, write these books. I know some people believe they did. And look, that you cannot support that belief. I mean, look, you get to believe it, sure. And I mean, I don't think belief is a choice. But like then expecting that whatever your holy book says that God wants or thinks or what it thinks is moral, you can't impose that on anybody else or get to claim that anybody else should even care about it because you can't demonstrate it. Now, morality as such has got to be about well-being and welfare, and that's sort of going like, it's a whole other video. But I think, look, I make a claim, as I said, that I don't think there are any gods. I think no gods exist. And yes, it is a claim I do have to back up. So I'm going to back it up here. But I don't think Creaky makes his claim. I don't see him. He's just he's more like, I don't see any evidence for God. And I don't either, quite honestly. I don't see any evidence for God, right? So, and as I said, how certain I am and how hard I am on this question, or any atheist is again going to depend on the nature of the claim. And a lot of it, I mean, all of us are agnostic to some degree, as in, what do we know? Even theists, even though they claim they know, they don't. So look, what are the evidences against any sorts of God? Well, the problem is any definition I've heard for any God or gods, it's logically contradictory, it's incomprehensible, it's non-testable, non-falsifiable, it's, like there's a divine hiddenness, which is a big problem. There's a problem of evil, which I don't, paradox of omnipotence, which I don't think is even, related, I don't think that is ridiculous. I think anyone being, maximally, petition, any of the omnis, omni petitions, omni beneficial, omni loving, omni whatever, I don't think thing is, when people come up with their definitions of God, whether it's from some holy book or just somewhere else, I'm like going, how do you know? Because, like, how can we test whether or not this God, one, exists, and two, has any of the properties that you or any other source says it does? I mean, you go to say, oh, it just makes sense. No, it doesn't. It doesn't to us, and I don't think it makes sense to you. You just believe this. You think you have to believe it, and for some other reason that, it could be social, you want to be seen as good and moral, you were brought up in the belief or whatever. I'm not dismissing that belief and religion can help. I think it causes more harm than good, in my opinion. But that's not what, I don't think that's, look, Creaky Blinder is not saying, well, maybe he does say that, I don't know. I mean, from what I've seen, he's very sort of like a bit milder than I would put it. And that, as I said, doesn't mean he's right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and he's wrong, or anything else. And look, there's also the omniscience versus free will. I don't even think what most people think of free will exists, period. But I mean, omniscience versus free will. I mean, in a lot of these holy books, you see gods interacting directly in person with the figures, the characters in the stories. So you're sitting there going, didn't that violate the free will of those? I mean, it makes absolutely zero sense. And also, too, you got to look at like free will of whose free will matters. Like, should the victim of a horrific crime free will be subjugated because someone else's free will is more important? I mean, it's also the argument from might makes right. Pretty much, it's like, let's punish all the bad who we think are bad people. Let's punish them disproportionately, sometimes eternally. And I mean, like, I don't think punishment helps. I'm not saying don't have consequences. It's not, but punishing people instead of helping people educating them, giving them psychological, mental health treatment, training them in useful skills, helping them build themselves up in community, help them contribute positively, help them deal with the issues, and also get them to help in some way help their victims of crime too. So I'm not saying don't give them consequences, but I mean, I think prison does not make people better. It does not stop crime. Okay, it doesn't solve anything. I mean, so look, logical inconsistencies, empirical and scientific stuff too. Here we go. As I said, absence of any verifiable evidence. Centuries of scientific observation have yielded zero empirical, reproducible data supporting any kind of divine intervention. Extraordinary claims, which all claims of any gods or miracles or supernatural, paranormal, whatever, requires extraordinary evidence, which remains completely absent. The God of the gaps fallacy. I mean, historically, humans have attributed natural phenomena like lightning, disease, and planetary orbits to the gods. As science explains these mechanisms through physics, chemistry, biology, the need for a divine explanation has systematically shrunk. Natural explanation for origins, such as like the standard Big Bang model, cosmic inflation, all occurred and explain the universe without any supernatural origin or supernatural input. On a biological level, evolutionary mechanisms perfectly account for complexity and diversity of life without requiring any divine anything or a conscious designer. And abiogenesis, while there's still a lot of work to be done in the area, shows that chemical methods to start building the building blocks of very early life is entirely possible, and they've shown that it does in fact happen. Now we still need to do a lot of work in this stuff, but it's not like we know nothing. And there's the problem of really poor design. Biological organisms are filled with structural flaws that contradict the idea of any intelligent designer. Examples include the human blind spot, the convoluted path to the recurrent laryngeal nerve, and vestigial structures, which vestigial does not mean completely useless, it just means diminished or changed use. So things like the appendix, I mean, it still has uses, it's changed, it's diminished from what it was, and frequently becomes blocked and requiring medical intervention or the person dies. Evidentiary and structural arguments. The argument from inconsistent revelations. Thousands of mutually exclusive religions, and even within religions, exist globally, each claiming absolute truth based on divine revelation. They can't all be true, but they can all be wrong. The fact that religious belief is highly correlated with geographic birth location implies that religions are cultural constructs rather than any universal truth. Divine hiddenness, as I said, if there's a deity that's at all benevolent, requires any kind of personal relationship or even belief in it with humanity, their existence, then it's up to them to show themselves in some testable, repeatable, manifestation way. The existence should be obvious, not just arguments that seem to come from, bad ideas. The total lack of any clear, unambiguous communication leaves millions of seekers in doubt. A lot of arguments, fights, and wars over which version of which religion is right, which is incompatible with any kind of loving or any kind of even minimally invested God. Mythological substructure, historical and archaeological evidence or analysis shows major monotheistic traditions evolved from earlier polytheistic or Hebraic mythologies. Many foundation texts, and in fact they all do, use circular reasoning, utilizing the Holy Book itself as sole evidence for the supernatural events it claims, which is Like, if you think about it, that's absurd. You know, wouldn't use Harry Potter for the example of evidence of wizards or magic or any other stuff like that. You know, books about, you can name anything, books about dragons to mean that dragons exist. I mean, but the thing is, they just go, oh, no, these books are written by some sort of God. Well, you can't demonstrate that. I get that that's what you believe and it means something to you, but the fact that the damage it does in many instances is problematic. And the thing is, look, people want their beliefs respected, and look, fair enough, but if your belief, and every belief at its basis, I'm not saying people here, here's the difference, belief at its basics is anti-women, anti-LGBT, and seen to be, quite frankly, very not interested in equity, equality, helping humanity as a whole. It's all, we are the chosen ones and you're not. Pretty much that comes down to it. But like, you know, psychological and anthropological explanations, the frameworks show, so psychological and anthropological, so I can't say the word, frameworks demonstrate why humans invent naturally the ideas or concepts of God, showing that God can be fully explained as a byproduct of human evolution. Agent detection bias. Evolution favors hominids who assumed a rustling bush was a predator, an active agent, rather than just the wind. This hyperactive agency detection causes humans to mistake natural random events for intentional actions by invisible spirits or gods. Patternicity and existential comfort. The human brain is pattern-seeking organism. All right, our brain is a pattern-seeking organ that struggles with randomness. And inventing a higher power, or thinking there's a higher power, provides a psychological coping mechanism to smooth the fear of death, rationalize suffering, and establishes social order. And it gives people a lot of purpose. And I think that actually is potentially quite harmful, because a lot of the times these purposes are not based in any kind of reality or any kind of thing that helps people. So look, as I said, Creaky is more than capable of speaking out for himself, and this is just me to address this. Look, the thing is, we all have different beliefs. Atheism is not a belief. And in general, saying, you know, I don't believe in God is not a claim, right? It's just saying, I don't believe in God. Now, how certain I am of that in any particular case, as I said already about 1,000,000 times, is going to depend on the claim made, right? That is just, you can't ask us to do any different than that. And that doesn't mean we're being dishonest or scaredy cats or cowards or whatever. It means we're being intellectually honest. And like, all of us share a planet. We are all related. All humans are related. We are all family, however distant lives. We have got to find a way to get along. Now, laws in a lot of countries that are anti-gay, anti-women, anti-atheist are horrific. And in every case, they're just about based on religious ideology. In other cases, other forms of ideology. We need to stop that. Okay? Not fundamentally immoral because you're gay, lesbian, bi, or trans, and you're not fundamentally moral for being an atheist or being of some different religion. We've got to sit down with each other, break bread, and we've got to find a way of like working together that is equitable and equality. We lift up everybody. We should not, I don't care how small a minority of some people are, they still deserve rights, and we've got to ensure that they are included in everything. We can't just say majority rules. That's not how things should work. We're going to say, how do we make sure everyone's included? How do we acceptance, and, you know, how do we get, you know, instead of hate or bigotry and persecution, how do we start moving forward to acceptance and love? And like, honestly, we've got to stop fighting each other, address climate change, address the very real threat of AI, and sitting around arguing over a god or gods, or who's a prophet and who's not, who's a son of God and who's not, seems like a complete waste of time to me, and it's fundamentally damaging. I understand that this is I used to be Christian, I was born into Christianity. I mean, I understand this is very important to people, and people get offended about their religious beliefs. Sometimes I think too easily, but I do understand. But the problem is, you want what you to believe to be imposed on others. I mean, you could say the same about me, but my beliefs are secular humanistic, right? I don't want atheism imposed. I want secular humanism, because that does care about welfare, well-being. It cares about human rights. It cares about inclusions, equity, and make sure, we've got like 28,000 people dying a day of starvation or hunger-related causes. That's idiotic in the extreme. So can we, like whoever this CS was, I mean, I think he's lashing out, perhaps because he's angry about how Creaky has addressed him. And okay, well, you get to be angry, but like making idiotic statements that aren't true, I don't think helps you. I mean, look, the thing is, I have a problem with all apologists of any religion, because I think, from my opinion, they fundamentally exist by misrepresenting what people are saying, misrepresenting beliefs, and quite frankly, lying through their teeth. And a lot of times, especially creationists, are dreadful. But all religious apologists, especially on social media, I'm thinking, whether deliberately or otherwise, are fundamentally dishonest. I mean, okay, some of them might really believe it, but their beliefs are not reached through honest means. And they quote mine, they selectively represent beliefs, they misquote. I mean, they treat like Richard Dawkins like he's the Pope of atheism, and good grief. Look, that guy, I wish Richard Dawkins would shut the fuck up forever. He's transphobic in the extreme. I don't think he's particularly pro-women. But and there's been some allegations, I don't know how true they are, of sexual sexual issues with women and perhaps younger. And I disagree with him fundamentally on his transphobia, because I'm gender fluid and, we exist. Trans people exist. Get over it. Stop, dunking on trans people, mate. Shut up. Like, he used to be very good on evolution. He was very rabidly, I think, anti-religion. In some cases, I did agree with some stuff he said. In other cases, I'm like going, okay. He was not maybe... Well, I think the whole who they called themselves a new atheist, I mean, a lot of them, they were very, hard line. And I'm hard line, but I'm trying to find better ways of communicating than perhaps they did. I probably agree with some of these people's positions, but I don't agree with all of them. Like, I mean, what's his name? Sam Harris, and I think Christopher, what's his name, or whatever his name, idiot. I don't care. Anyway, some of them are rapidly anti-Islamic. And yes, Islam has got problems. And worldwide, it's probably the most problematic religion, I think. But that does not mean that every other ideology, religious and otherwise, gets a pass. And that does not mean every Muslim is bad or wrong or evil. 95% of them are very good people. And I think, yes, the hardliners of Islam are very dangerous, but some of the hardliners of Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, any other belief or ideology, the hardliners, I mean, I'm a social democrat, but I think capitalism is a huge fail. I think we've got to stop it. I think we've got to find better ways. But I mean, hard line into other, very, very, what China has, like communism, I don't think that's a good idea. I think we can take aspects of it that work, and we take aspects of social democracy that work. Capitalism does not work. It favours the rich and punishes the poor. But as I said, we've got to find a way of getting along, stop fighting stupid, idiotic wars. We've got to get off fossil fuels to stop the idiotic, stupid wars, get on non-fossil fuel resources. We're going to start we're not the only species alive. We are rely on every other species for food, for clothing, for sometimes shelter, for different things, for heat sometimes. The air we breathe, I mean, I don't know how much more we need to. We cannot just go through using up all these resources and utilities and think it's not going to come back and bite us in the ass, and it already is. So look, I just wish theists, especially on YouTube, because I saw this on YouTube, I'd just be honest. Don't misrepresent what we say. You do not have to agree with it. You can say why we're wrong, and you can say why. Now, if there's any honest criticism that's done in good, I guess, good faith, I hate using that, but, that they're trying to do the right thing of me, I will look at I will look at anything people say or present to me, and I will do my best to be very critical. I'm always go through my own positions. I re-examine all of my beliefs at all times, and I re-examine everything I know about science and the world all the time because it changes constantly. And I don't take anything just as, just because a textbook says it or some expert says it, doesn't mean I'll automatically believe it. I'll go, what do peer-reviewed studies say? Why do they say that? What evidence have they presented to you? How did they get there? What's the methodology? What can I see and determine for myself? I mean, and then a lot of other stuff comes into it. And I think that's what we all need. I want empathy and compassion taught to children from birth as a mandatory all across the world in all the schools. In fact, all humans should be taught that. How do we be inclusive, empathetic, compassionate? How do we go and help others? Because that is what we need to do. Okay, anyway, enough from me. Look, as I said, you get to believe whatever you get to believe. I'm not sure it's a choice. But let's all try and have beliefs that don't actively discriminate against others and that don't lead to harmful actions.